I think Senator Preister is far too generous. I'd like to ask him a question, if he will yield.
Senator Preister, would you yield to a question?
Yes, I will.
Senator Preister, if your amendment is not adopted, well, let me get right to the heart of the matter. If this bill is killed, what happens?
The fund will not get the extension, and the money that would normally go into that fund, $1 million of that, would stay in the waste reduction fund, and it would still be available for these same grants, but they wouldn't have a higher priority up to $1 million.
Thank you. Mr. President, I would like to ask Senator Loudon a question or two if he will yield.
Senator Loudon, would you yield to a question?
Yes, I would.
Senator Loudon, does all the money which goes into this fund come from that $1 per tire which a person pays when purchasing new tires?
Yes, into this grant, what do you call it, recycling program or whatever it is, yeah.
Okay, and how long ago was that $1 fee or tax placed on tires, if you know?
Well, I suppose 20 years or more. I don't know. It's been years. It's been years ago. It's before I got into politics, anyway.
And Senator, this is a tax, isn't it? This $1 on each tire is a tax. Isn't that true?
Well, most people call it a tax, but it goes into this recycling fund, and that, I mean, it's, what would you say, an earmark tax, I guess, because it's supposed to dispose of the tires.
Now, if I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Senator Preister. If this bill is killed, first of all, what is being done right now that will be extended by this bill?
What would be done right now is extending the grant part of it for tire amnesty, and that would be the part that comes out of that waste reduction and recycling fund that would be set aside for recycling tires. I think the fiscal note said they set aside up to $1 million annually, and with that, if this bill was killed, then that money wouldn't be set aside for just scrap tires.
Now,
they would have to go into the grant funding like anybody else would be getting grant funding to get rid of scrap tires.
What is the meaning of this amnesty? To whom is it granted, and of what does it consist?
Well, I think that's a loose, what would you say, wording for the thing is because these communities usually leverage some grant money.
Thank you. Senator Loudon, is it your view that this $1 tax should never go away, and as more money may be generated, more uses can be found for spending that money?
Imagine as long as we generate tires, yeah, we'd probably just as well have that disposal fee on it.
And if more money is generated, more ways for spending it can then be found. Is that true?
Well, I suppose at the present time they just put in, what, $1 million for this grant tire program. They grind the rubber up and put it in football fields and that sort of thing.
Why should the Department of Roads and the football field gain the benefits from this $1 tax that everybody pays each time a new tire is purchased?
Time.
Senator Loudon, I think, as I said, Senator Preister is being generous. If there's to be an extension, it should be 1 year at the most. We are the ones who provide the oversight. Without us, there is none. We have no idea and will have no idea of precisely how this tax money is being spent. This $1 is a tax. Down through the years, I have opposed increases that the Department of Motor Vehicles wanted because I saw them as taxes which were hidden and misnamed.
Well,
would you
interrupt, Senator, since
it's
we're
your
on my
time, but here's the question I was getting to. Would you support extending it for 1 year rather than an effort to kill the bill?
Well, no, I think the last time we did it was 4 years, and even 2 years you have to come back every other year and look at the thing. Somewhere along.
I resent that $1 tax on tires. All this talk about tax cutting. Here is a tax that affects people, to a greater extent than others that exist right now, than most others. I want to kill the whole thing. And since Senator Loudon wants to have a knockdown drag out to see if he can get it extended 5 years, I'm going to try to kill it right here today. And I'm going to see how important my colleagues think extending this tax and the way the money is spent for 5 years really is. Would you be willing to say that a state agency is going to be allowed to have a certain amount that we appropriate for it this year, and that it can, if it's not going to spend any more than that, it doesn't have to come back? That will ride on for 5 years. But if they think they need more, then they come back. See, let me ask Senator Loudon a question.
Senator Loudon, will you yield to a question?
Yes, it will.
Senator Loudon, if it turns out that more money is needed than what is being generated now, or more will be needed to do exactly what they're doing now, would these people want to come to the legislature and increase the amount that would be available to them?
Well, I don't think so, because I think they plan on working within the perimeters of what they have. The way these has been done, they grant the amount of money they have, because they were short last year, what, $97,000 or something like that, for the amount of grants that were asked for. So they're already using up all of the grant money, and I haven't heard them asking for more or anything. They're willing to work within that dollar tires.
Well, the grants
deduction.
the work being done with those grants is not essential. That's tack-on work. That is gravy. That money is not needed by any of these entities to do what they do. They have found a way to use a hidden tax to get grants. If the tax is paying for an essential service, it should not be a grant, whoever wins the race to whoever is making or approving of the grants. There should be earmarking so that a certain specific amount is made available. But these are not essential services. Grants are always based on that notion of who wins the race. So you would rather go ahead and fight this out this morning, if I understand you correctly. Is that true, Senator Loudon? That's a question if Senator Loudon will yield, Mr. President.
Senator Loudon, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would, no, I wouldn't want to fight it out to the death, because it's something that needs to be done, but I'm telling you that I don't think 2 years is enough. We did 4 years the last time, and it worked out quite well.
Okay.
So I think somewhere along the line, if you think 5 years is way too much, then all right, then I suppose we can do some kind of a compromise. But 2 years is too soon. We'd be right back here again.
Thank you, Senator Loudon. We come back here every year. That's one of the most lame arguments I have ever heard. Is he so lazy? Is his job as chair so difficult and onerous that if this question comes back next year, it's going to exhaust him, it's going to exhaust the committee, and they're going to say, oh my God, here it is again. Here it is again. I feel like Von Helsing every time I think Dracula is dead. Here he comes again. That is preposterous. I know we don't make a lot of money, but to review how money is being spent is too onerous. It's too hard. They can't come back every 2 years to justify what they're doing when others, agencies, come back every year. I'm going to fight it. And I will fight it to the death. Not mine, not Senator Loudon's, the death of this program. These people who gave him the figure 5 years, he said he didn't know why they did it. They pulled it out of a hat. So we got to be stuck with 5 years as members of the legislature because somebody gave Senator Loudon a figure, the committee sent it out here, and I've got to go along and rubber stamp it? I'm not a rubber stamp. And I'm not going to rubber stamp this extension just because they bring it. I don't like the program anyway. He ought to take his 2 years and run with it. But no, they told him take the 5 or nothing. So it's my job to see if I can see that he gets nothing. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're recognized. And this is your third time.
Yes, but as like Dracula in this bill, I'll be back. Oh, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, too. I don't know if he came back or not. But anyway, Mr. President, members of the legislature, I would like to get some assistance from Senator Preister on this matter, if he will yield to a question or two.
Senator Preister, would you yield to a question?
Yes, I will.
Senator Preister, you had mentioned that this notion of giving, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, the tire recycling or disposal a priority status, it was for the purpose of removing those huge mountains of tires that existed in various parts of the state. If anything in my question is incorrect, I would like you to comment on that issue as you see fit.
I will.
Grants be extended.
Anyone who applies, manufacturers of AstroTurf and other things can apply. People that want to use the tires for asphalt in the roads, the state of Nebraska can apply. More and more, it's going to municipalities for amnesty programs or bring in your old tire and we'll take them for nothing programs.
So the ones who would be the primary beneficiaries at this point would be these municipalities.
The cities and the counties don't want them ending up in the ditches and in alleys and places where we don't want them. And so they are encouraging this safe disposal of them, which I think is good.
Are tires ending up in ditches, alleys, and other locations as of yore, even with this program?
There still are some, but I think we're seeing less.
Senator Preister, how much damage do you think would be done overall if this bill were killed, which meant that that earmarking would go away? Could they still get in line at the trough and try to battle for some money which is in that recycling fund?
Yes, Senator, they could still apply, and they would have to have a good enough application to rise to the level of being funded if it were with everything in the waste reduction fund.
1 minute.
By carving this, what I would consider a large amount of money out of this fund based on the size of the fund, others who might want to receive funding have their chances diminished by the amount of this earmarking for tires. Would you agree with that?
That is correct, because we specify $1 million goes just for tire projects.
There might be projects which others might think have as high a priority as the tire disposal. Is that possible?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I would ask of Senator Preister. How much time do I have, Mr. President?
30 seconds.
Well, thank you very much.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Chambers would move to amend Senator Preister's amendment.
Senator Chambers, you're recognized on your floor amendment to Floor Amendment 31. To open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I was watching a movie. It was called Shaka Zulu, and a scene was arrived at where the discussion of how to trap a monkey arose. And the explanation was that you put a seed, a nut, or something which the monkey likes into a container which has a narrow neck. The monkey, with its hand open, can reach into the neck, but once it seizes in its hand the seed or whatever the lure is, it cannot withdraw the fist which is formed from the closing of the hand. Rather than let go of what it has, the monkey remains trapped, and that's how the monkey is snared without doing any significant harm to it. Senator Loudon has reached into the neck and has made a fist, and he's not going to open his hand. So, we're going to see just how this plays out. This that I'm doing, if I kill this bill, is not going to do away with the dollar fee on the tires. It's not going to kill this, let me call it an environmental cleanup fund for ease of reference. It's not going to kill that fund. It simply says that in the pecking order, this tire disposal program is not going to have first place. It can still come to the trough, but it takes its place like other programs. It has to prove that what it is seeking this money for has a higher priority, a greater value, does more good for society than these other projects. All rivers, it is said, and most people are crooked because they follow the path of least resistance. In this instance, having carved out a niche which gives them an advantage over everybody else and a guaranteed amount of money from this fund, should that amount be made available. They don't want to give it up because they're like rivers. They're seeking the path of least resistance. Senator Loudon wants to continue that path of least resistance for them for 5 years. Nobody has discussed any of these other projects, any of these other programs, or the ones who may be left out in the cold, because this tire program is going to be given that first place, that first claim. For clarification, Mr. President, I would like to ask Senator Loudon a question, because I do not want to misstate what he may have said earlier, if he will yield.
Senator Loudon, would you yield to a question?
Yes, I would.
Senator Loudon, if I understood you correctly, you said there was a shortfall of $97,000 in terms of what people were requesting in the form of grants. Was that $97,000 a shortfall in the grants that would be made available for this program that we're talking about here?
Yes, I think so.
All right. How much money was yet available for all other projects, if you know?
Oh, let's see. No, it'll take me a little bit to look up the numbers
Well,
here.
you don't have to look it up right now, but you would be able to find that at some point, because we're going to be on this a long time. Let me ask you this question. Senator Stoopman asked you how much money would be generated by this $1 fee on tires, and for whatever year you were answering, what was the amount you said would be generated?
1.8 million is what, for 2007 is what they estimate.
$1,800,000. So this one program, because it has lobbyists and advocates, will consume more than 50% of the total amount raised by that tax. Is that true?
Well, yes, because that's what it is a tire recycling program. That's what it was put in there for, was to recycle and get rid of old tires.
Senator Preister indicated that it was in the mid-90s or thereabouts that this particular earmarking took place. So if you will stay on your feet, I'd like to ask Senator Preister a question so that I don't misstate anything.
Senator Preister, would you yield to a question?
Yes, I will.
Senator Preister, had you given the year when this earmarking for the tire program took place that put them at the head of the line?
That was in 1994.
Thank you. How long before that had the fund been created through the taking of $1 from the citizen for each tire purchase? When did that start?
In 1990, LB 163 was passed by the legislature that enacted and caused that $1 per tire fee to be placed on them.
And even though it was being raised by a tax on the tires, the money was not exclusively for the purpose of getting rid of tires, nor was that money earmarked for that purpose or any amount of it. Is that true?
That's correct, not initially.
Thank you. Members of the legislature, and that's all I'll ask you, Senator Loudon, because Senator Preister clarified, this money, although derived from a tax on tires, was not set aside exclusively for the disposal of tires. Even with this earmarking, the totality of the fund will not go to the disposal of tires, just more than 50% of it. But I do not think the program ought to stay in existence, and at some future point I may try to eradicate the fund by doing away with the $1 tax. But when you're going to remove a tax as alluring as it is, perhaps it should be done by way of a bill. But I'd venture to say when we get on the budget and some of these other programs and proposals that relate to taxes, some recommendations by way of amendment will be offered which were not themselves the subject of an independently introduced bill. So very important matters can be addressed without there having been a bill introduced for that purpose. Senator Loudon wants 5 years extension or nothing. I don't like the bill. I'm going to try to get nothing, but I'm going to have a way to discuss all of the significant aspects of this bill by way of amendments. Now, if he'd accept my amendment to Senator Preister's and then add it to the bill, I'd be off his case. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, these municipalities are spoiled. They're lazy. This is not a big brain-busting item. If they're talking about their budgeting, how much trouble is it going to take to address this item? If they're going to seek a grant, if they get one or don't get it. Senator Carlson has spent time telling us how competent people are in the rural areas. I didn't question it, but now I'm going to have to start questioning it. If we say that every 2 years, well, we're going to extend this 2 years, that's going to be so onerous they can't cope with it. He's going to take 2 years, perhaps, or hold out for 3 or 4 or 5. And I'm going to try to get rid of this program that's being extended for 5 years. It's early in the session. We have plenty of time. We may as well spend it on this bill. But if I'm willing to spend this much time on this bill to do something about this tax, and I'm not even removing the tax, imagine the time I'm prepared to take when we get to a tax bill. If there's a taxing proposal with which I disagree, and on those bills, it's going to be hard for anybody to come up with something that'll get 33 votes. So we might be on one of those for the rest of the session. But I'm just getting you warmed up here. This is turning into a boondoggle. This earmarking for this purpose has not always been a part of this bill, this law. They should be grateful, the grant receivers up to now, for what they have received thus far. But instead of being grateful, they are becoming greedy, and they think the legislature is a pushover. All they have to do is come in here with something and say it's for the rural areas, and everybody's going to feel guilty and say, well, the rural people can't do anything for themselves. If you make them have to concentrate on something like this, 2 years from now, it'll blow their brains. All of the neuron connections in their brain will short circuit. Their systems will shut down. I don't believe that. That's why I say it's not a substantive argument. It has no merit whatsoever. My amendment will reduce the 2 years to 1 year. And if that fails, then I will try to reduce it to 9 months. And if that fails, then maybe Senator Loudon will negotiate with me from 9 months to 18 months, which would double what I was talking about. And that's how we'll negotiate. And if he doesn't want 18 months, then 10 months. And we'll do like you do when you're shooting a mortar. Senator Carlson, mortars are these tubes that sit on this big old heavy round metal plate, and you set the tube on it and you drop a shell into it, it fires. And you can't aim them with precision. So you bracket the target. You deliberately shoot beyond where you think the target is, then you shoot at a distance closer than you think the target is, then you walk your way forward or walk your way back until you finally drop something close enough to the target to hit it. Well, that's the way Senator Loudon wants me to proceed this morning. Senator Preister went beyond what I'm prepared to do. Well, now I'm doing less than maybe what even Senator Preister is prepared to do. But prepared to do it, I am. And do it, I shall. At some point, the legislature is going to decide to agree with me that it is not too great a burden if this boondoggle is extended just 2 years instead of 5. When it runs out the next time, if term limits are upheld, I won't even be here. Then they can extend it 10 years, 20 years. They can do anything that the lobbyists can get them to do. But while I'm here, I'm going to show that if the legislature or if a legislator has some backbone, some of these meritless proposals are not going to just be on a greased skid and find their way to a successful passage into law. This extension need not be 5 years. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers.
Mr. President, bills that I offer, I believe in. The Transportation Committee killed a bill that meant a great deal to me because there is an ordinance in Omaha which leads to selective enforcement of the law when it comes to cars with transit stickers. They pick certain cities where people, certain areas where people of certain complexions are likely to live, and they enforce it against them. They will enforce it against students. They will tow the car, then make the person pay the cost of the towing and any storage if there is any. I think the committee made a blunder, but I'm not going to try to pull it out of the committee. If I decide I'm going to take revenge, I have a different way that I'm going to do it other than by undermining the committee system. I have other bills which may not get on the floor, but I'm not going to make a motion to pull it from the committee. Sometimes form should not be elevated above substance, but when that which would be called form goes to the very nature and essence of how this legislature operates, then it is not form in the sense of something which itself lacks substance. It is substantive when you decide to pull a bill from a committee. This is going to be an opening in the discussion as to how much influence lobbyists will have. They've already lined up some of the new people and said, this bill isn't going to come out, you can make a motion to pull it from committee, and that's going to be the strategy. And I will oppose those efforts. I'm not convinced that these vaccinations cause autism. I'm not an expert. I can't say what impact, if any, it has. But if every child who gets the vaccination doesn't get autism, then it must be the vaccination in combination with something else or a predisposition or something. If we give a certain level of strychnine, amount of it, it will kill most of the people who take it. Now, if somebody doesn't die from what is considered a lethal dose, that person is the aberration. But for the general run, that strychnine is lethal and deadly in that lethal amount. If the presence of this substance in these vaccines cause autism, there should be more cases of autism than not. That has not been shown to be the case. If somebody votes to pull the bill out, I will not conclude they're doing it to undermine the system, but I will not vote to bring it out. Since I've been in this legislature, my thinking has evolved. When I first came here, I didn't care a pop of the finger for this place or the people in it. There were some narrow-minded, ignorant, bigoted people, and they made it clear. So I was going to deal with them the way they dealt with me. As time went on, some of them were weeded out. I began to see what the legislature could do as a branch of government that would alleviate some of the very serious, chronic, almost intractable problems that people have in this society. So utilized properly and effectively, the legislative process could be a tool for making the part of the world that we live in, which is a very small corner,
1 minute,
somewhat better for people who otherwise would have no help and no hope. I don't want the system weakened. I think in institutional terms when it comes to the legislature. And I think one of the important aspects of this body is the committee system. The committees are to cull legislation and not send everything to the floor because it's introduced. I'm telling you, that hard-headed Transportation Committee, unreasonable as they are, killed one of my bills. But that's what happens when we offer legislation. We're not guaranteed anything. I'm not even getting into the merits of the debate about these vaccines. But I am saying very strenuously today, and it will be my position throughout the legislative session, that I will not support pulling bills from committee. Thank you, Mr. President.